Ready? Welcome to the Downtown Community Partnership's Great Debate for the 2020 candidates for Fargo City Commission. I am Tim Flacco, a DCP board member, and recently I was the chair of that board, and I will serve as moderator for tonight's event. Today's candidates will be given an opportunity to answer questions provided by Fargo voters that cover a wide range of topics that impact our community. We will learn more about each candidate, their view on these topics, as well as a glimpse on how they would handle key issues that face our commissioners every day. The Downtown Community Partnership is a nonprofit organization. Their mission is to collaborate with businesses, residents, and the community partners dedicated to the economic growth, vibrancy, and advocacy of the downtown Fargo. A strong sense of place filled with vibrant culture, art, and commerce is the vision and the emphasis on advocacy, people, and signature events. Melissa Brandt, who joins us tonight, and her team, and Chris Schlepp and his bid team are tireless in their efforts to make downtown a source of pride for all of us. The rules of the debate are as follows. Candidates will be asked a series of questions, and they will be called upon with their response. Candidates will have up to generally 60 seconds for their opening remarks and for each question until the end. Laura will actually be the timer from the DCP, and she's celebrating her 30th, her birthday today. Yeah. I won't say which one, but she was born 30 years ago. We have the timers going on, and then we'll make special consideration for one of the candidates who's joining us remotely, so we may have to quietly tell them when there are 15 seconds left and when their time is up. We will rotate from the first person who asks the question so as to provide equity and who is in the hot seat first. Earlier before the debate, the candidates drew their seat location so that their location was randomized. Those watching at home will notice that we are practicing physical distancing for this event. I will note that candidate John Strand is experiencing a bit of a scratchy throat, so he will be joining us remotely. I would also note that a short while ago we received an email from Bradford Schaefer who told us that he is withdrawing his candidacy for the Fargo City Commission. So we will have now 6 candidates who are actively pursuing that office. Please note that due to the virus, this year's voting in Fargo is by mail only for the June election. Also note, for the first time, Fargo is using approval voting for the City Commission election. So while there are 2 commission seats that will be filled, voters can vote for as many or as few candidates as they wish. Voters can vote for as few as 1 candidate or as many as 6 candidates in theory for the Fargo City Commission race. Our thanks to each of you candidates for your participation tonight and for your willingness to seek out the office of the Fargo City Commission. I would note that earlier today the DCP sent out a questionnaire, and that is found on the DCP website. Also, thanks to the City of Fargo, who serves as the physical host for this event, and for their efforts in broadcasting this event tonight, and it's also be available online afterwards, so that people can watch this who live in the area. With special thanks to Brian, who is running the camera, and the board tonight. We know that during this time of the virus, the ability of candidates to interact face-to-face with citizens is greatly diminished, so the DCP hopes this service we are providing tonight is a benefit to all of you. So let's begin. And again, these questions will be for all candidates. The first one starting with Rachel Abu to kick things off. We're asking for candidates for 1 minute each to provide their opening remarks, anything they wish to say, to kind of kick things off, and then we'll go to candidate Preston and then around. So, please.
So my name is Rachel Aboa, and I am running for City Commissioner. And the reason what drove me to this decision was because I definitely wanted my community that represents so many diversity to also reflect that on the City Commissioner board. I also wanted to be an active member or point of resource, sorry, a little bit nervous, a point of resource where small business owners or new homeowners or anybody in the community can have a personal contact with. I volunteered with several different organizations such as Churches United, Share House, the immigrants that's relocating with education and several different things. So that is my main drive, to diversify and include. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Preston.
Good evening. Thank you for watching this, those of you that are out there. I am going to just introduce myself real quickly. For those of you that don't know me, I served on the Fargo City Commission for 8 years, back in 92 to 2000. During that time, I had the Planning and Development Department, the Police and Health Departments. And we did revise the Land Development Code at that time, as well as I led the effort to create and implement the first downtown redevelopment plan. I served also on the on the Fargo Board of Education for 4 years, which gave me a good understanding of the challenges of the educational system. And then finally, for the last 16 years, I've been owning and operating my own business. It was an in-home service for the elderly, which made me certainly acutely aware of the issues the elderly are facing as they're trying to age in place at home. Thanks.
Candidate Greenberg.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you for participating this afternoon and listening to the views of those of us who are running for 2 of the city commission seats. I'd also like to convey my gratitude to the citizens of Fargo for stepping up and working through this COVID-19 challenge we have as a community. I am originally from Mapleton, North Dakota. Moved to Fargo in 1984. I've had the opportunity to be largely involved in economic development over the years. Served 20 plus years in the North Dakota legislature, and then retiring in 2014, and then in 2016 was encouraged to run for one of the 2 open city commission seats to bring the experience I've gained in the legislature, as well as the business community and the many organizations I've served on the board for. So I'm running for re-election, and I appreciate everyone's participation tonight, and thank you for being here.
Candidate Kostosek.
My name is Edward Christosik, and I'm running for Fargo City Commission because I feel the citizens of the city of Fargo need a voice that will vehemently advocate for lowering property taxes, special assessments, and bringing additional fiscal responsibility to the Fargo City Commission. I'm a 21-year retired soldier from the Minnesota Army National Guard. I've got 2 combat tours overseas. I hold a bachelor's degree in business management. Currently, I work with Case IH. I'm a field service representative, and I cooperate with 29 dealers across 3 states, Montana, North Dakota, and Minnesota. I'm very much a grassroots candidate, and my intention is to work for the benefit of all the people. I stand for smaller government, total government transparency, and an unwavering belief in the wisdom of the Constitution of the United States. I want to thank everyone who has supported me thus far, most especially my wife and daughters, who have been very supportive of my candidacy. And I would like to thank Downtown for having this debate so we can get our word out. Thank you.
Candidate Rimpf.
I'm excited to be here today, and I'm excited to hear what my fellow candidates have to say. I'm running for City Commission because I got annoyed with City Hall, and as additional things started adding up and adding up and adding up, I was thinking somebody ought to do something about that, and I volunteered, so I am running, and I really do honestly believe that we deserve better from City Hall, and let's rock and roll. Oh, I guess John needs to be. John, are you there?
And next up, we'll have joining us remotely, candidate John Strand.
Thank you, everybody, for doing this event, and also thank you for letting me participate remotely. I just wouldn't want to bring my sore throat into the reach of other people. And like Commissioner Greenberg said, we're in some really extraordinary times. You know, a month or 2 months ago, this discussion wouldn't be the same as it is now. Everything has changed, but some things have not changed. We have a really great community. We have terrific people. We have folks who are stepping up to the table and doing a good job being good citizens. We have lots of work ahead of us reinventing government, as we rebound from this crisis. But if anybody can do it, it's us. I want to thank the people for having given me 4 years to serve them already. I had 8 years on the school board before that, so I think that all of us are ready to step up to the plate and go to work and roll up our sleeves. But if I'm given the chance and the honor again to do it for 4 more years, you can trust and rest assured that I'll give you my all. I'll put my heart into it, and I'll stand up for the people. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Now, our next question will again be for everyone, and you have up to 60 seconds to answer the question. And the next question will then go in sequence to candidate Arlette Preston. The question is, what is your vision for the future of Fargo? What goals and objectives would you like to see our community accomplish in the next 4 years? And if possible, tell us your top 3 priorities.
Okay. Yeah, you know, my vision is probably related to the top 3 priorities, so let me combine them. If I'm honored to serve on the City Commission, there's 3 areas that I would want to work on. To establish thriving neighborhoods as well as thriving families and a thriving workforce. That means working on more affordable housing options, as well as incentives for aging neighborhoods, and working for property tax relief, especially for the elderly in our community. It includes ensuring and working towards a living wage and workforce training to help people to fill jobs in the job market. And then finally, childcare accessibility and availability, and making that more affordable would be my 3rd priority. So.
Thank you. Candidate Greenberg.
Perhaps repeat the question?
What is your vision for the future of Fargo? What goals and objectives would you like to see our community accomplish in the next 4 years? And if possible, tell us your 3 top priorities.
Fargo's future is very bright. Granted, we have a challenge locally, statewide, and nationally right now we're working through. But when you look at the past, the city of Fargo has had consistent growth for many, many years. And that's created opportunity for folks to live, work, and play in Fargo and our region. And my vision is to sustain that and continue moving forward, because growth matters. I've been involved with growth my whole life, with job development and my time at the Greater Fargo-Moorhead EDC, partnering with NDSU and research and bringing new jobs to town. So growth is an integral part of what I stand for. Adding to that, though, we also have key infrastructure projects that we need to complete. One is the FM diversion and water supply. Wrapped around the infrastructure, also moving forward on developing a core neighborhood plan to address the housing and help revitalize some of our core neighborhoods in the community.
Thank you. Next up, candidate Christosek.
So my vision of Fargo in the future is much the same as what I've already heard. Growth is the key, and we can't grow unless we have affordable housing, and part of making that housing affordable is one of my 3 main priorities, and that's reducing property taxes. My other main priority is reducing special assessments. It is so expensive to live in Fargo right now. I tell people that who do not live in Fargo what I pay in property taxes, and they about fall off their chair. They can't believe it. And I know people that live on the other side of the river simply because it's too expensive to live here. So that's lowering property taxes and lowering special assessments to make that monthly mortgage payment more affordable is critical. We're not gonna increase our workforce, we're not gonna grow the city, and we're not gonna be able to do the things that we wanna do and make affordable housing to get that done. And finally, again, flood protection. We gotta get the inner city flood protection completed. We've got 8 or 10 miles of inner city flood walls that are not completed yet, and that's gotta be a priority.
Thank you. Candidate Rimpf.
My vision, I'll summarize as my 3 top issues. The first of which is we've all been pained to see some xenophobic comments met right in this room, and I would like to see an end to that. I believe that all of our citizens in Fargo, regardless of their religion or from what country they come from, should be treated with respect, and I would like to see that changed. The second thing I get sort of with from Ed, but we're a little bit different, and that our city commission has chosen to subsidize condos for very wealthy people and not for poor people. And the third thing is just keeping our residential zonings safe.
Thank you. Next, candidate Strand, remotely.
Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Good, thank you. This is a big question. My vision of Fargo, simply put, is that we have a great place for people to live, to work, to play, to retire. We have a tsunami of senior citizens coming over the horizon that will be choosing where to retire. If we don't decide Fargo is the town to retire in, we're missing an opportunity. But there's elements of a good city that we need to keep focusing on. And everybody has similar goals, it seems. Affordable housing, quality neighborhoods, and I'm going to add another element. That's public health, dealing with public and behavioral health so we can address addictions, we can address challenges in our community. Lastly, public safety and protection. So flood protection in regard to climate action, and also addressing droughts so we have adequate water when we get into those other extreme climate cycles. But public safety and public protection and public health are all key elements of a good community.
Time. Thank you. Next, Rochelle.
Thank you so much for that. My main priority would be retaining our graduates. We see many people come from all over the world to NDSU and MSUM, and as soon as they graduate, they cannot find a well-paying job. We need to retain that. When we retain them, they work in our community, they help us build our community, which then attracts more people to travel, as well as homeowners, small business owners. Those are our back end call. They are the ones that's helping us build our city. So we need to protect these people. I definitely agree with John when he says we need to be a source of rescue for those who are addicts or have mental illness or any type of sickness. We need to be the source of rescue for that. So as a city commissioner, those are my number 1 priority.
Thank you. The next question will go to candidate Greenberg. What do you see as opportunities where we can improve downtown Fargo, and where will you lead or help with that effort in the next 4 years?
Two that come to mind is the redevelopment of the Mid-America Steel site, which is a significant opportunity for our community and region. That business has relocated to the industrial park. And as we move forward in the next 4 years, we will be able to define what we want that physical location to resemble for our future, and also, in my opinion, reflect on the past and the history. Equally, across the street, the Park East development, which is just started with a private developer on multi-housing and multi-development. Eventually, we will provide new housing, affordable housing, with the Fargo Housing Authority on that location to the south. And then what do we want as an entrance into Fargo from Minnesota on the Park East land that is owned by the city of Fargo? Those are two key additional opportunities for downtown Fargo to move forward, as well as build on the success we've experienced under the Renaissance Zone.
Thank you. Candidate Kristosik.
So along with developing those lots that Commissioner Grinberg had mentioned, the one big thing I hear mostly about downtown is nobody wants to go downtown. And why do they not want to go downtown? They won't want to go downtown because they can't find a place to park. They have to walk blocks to go places. It's too crowded. And I've actually talked to people that are genuinely concerned about coming downtown because there's so many people. Some of the things that we need to do is we need to improve the ability to park so that people can go to the stores in the downtown area. We have to improve that safety. I think we need to upstep some foot patrols by the Fargo Police Department so that people feel safe when they're downtown, and make everything more accessible. Downtown is the core of the city. It's our cultural center. It's our arts center. We need to keep it going, but we need to make it so that people want to come here to visit it. If they don't want to, if they're not safe, or if it's too inconvenient, they're just not going to show up. Thanks.
Thank you. Candidate Rimpf.
I'm going to disagree with my noted colleagues here, and that the biggest problem I see with downtown Fargo is the COVID-19 thing, that we are going into a really, really problematic time in which many people are sick. We're unlikely to get a vaccine for a year and a half, maybe 2 years. It's hard to tell. We've got to get this thing under control so that people want to go into shops, that they want to be downtown. And the other thing I would say is that all these options that we're talking about seem rather costly. And when we're gonna, unemployed people do not pay property taxes. And we've got to pay our first responders. We've got to have money to pay the police officers and the fire and the health people. So I would say let's postpone any expensive developments to the downtown area for the next couple of years.
Thank you. Candidate Strand.
Thank you very much. And I like this idea of envisioning opportunities downtown. When I moved to downtown with my business, the High Plains Reader newspaper, almost a quarter of a century ago, the downtown was not the best place to be. It wasn't at the top of its game, but it took all of us envisioning and visualizing a better future, and all of us being part of that process. And look what we've accomplished. We have a world-class downtown. So yes, we have a bump in the road. I hope it's not horribly long. We will reinvent it. We have restaurants, we have bars, we have nightlife, we have entertainment. We're stepping up our housing opportunities downtown. We're stepping up our public safety downtown. The footprint of downtown is expanding. So I see first and foremost, collect ourselves, get healed for the moment, and then go back to thinking big and looking over the horizon for just doing the greatest stuff we can do. We have a lot to celebrate.
Thank you. Candidate Aboa.
Our downtown is amazing. I love to go there in the summertime with my child and just take a walk. To see how much it has grown from over the past years to now is miraculous. However, one of the other candidates says accessibility, and that's the main thing we need to focus on. We also need to focus on attracting more tourism to our downtown. Yes, we are not a bigger city, however, we are growing. So maybe strategizing in a way where we could invite outside investors to go ahead and help with our historical building and just modifying that, and also investing in some type of community center within our downtown would be my best strategy for our downtown.
Thank you. Candidate Preston.
Yeah, I agree fully that we need to get healed and get back to work after this pandemic. But once that's done, there's lots of opportunities. And my husband and I have been living downtown probably for now 14 years. And we've seen a lot of really positive changes. I would say the biggest opportunity, I think, or the gap that we see, and I'm active in the Downtown Neighborhood Association, one of the big gaps that we see is in workforce housing. We don't have enough affordable housing for individuals that are working in the food industry and those jobs that perhaps don't pay as well as some others. So the middle income, lower middle income kind of housing we need to focus on, and there's some great opportunity there. The other thing I could say is there is a great great downtown plan that was written probably 2 or 3 years ago. We need to get that back up on the table and implement some of those activities. There's lots in that plan with lots of opportunity there.
Thank you. The next question will go to candidate Edward Kristosek. The next legislative session in North Dakota and the sessions to come, there will be many options for using the earnings of the North Dakota Legacy Fund. How do you think it could be used to help Fargo? And we are especially interested in how it could be used to improve downtown Fargo, possibly.
So that's the key thing, is the earnings of the Legacy Fund. It takes a 2/3 vote, I believe, in the legislature to dip into the principal, so that we can't really touch. So we're only looking at the interest. We've got Prairie Dog Fund coming in. It's That's one of the things that is supposed to be used towards infrastructure. $13 million is what we're supposed to get in Prairie Dog this year. I'm a pretty firm believer in that should go directly to infrastructure. We need infrastructure that needs to be repaired. Our citizens are already being special assessed dramatically right now. They really cannot shoulder a whole lot more in special assessments. That money that comes in from the earnings from Prairie Dog and anything else that the legislature gives us from the legacy fund needs to go towards infrastructure. It needs to go towards inner city flood wall protection. It needs to go towards improving the city without raising special assessments on our residents.
Thank you. Candidate Rimpf.
Could you repeat the question, please?
The next legislative session and the sessions to come, there will be many options for using the earnings of the North Dakota Legacy Fund. How do you think it could be used to help Fargo? And we are especially interested in how it could be used to improve downtown Fargo.
I'm anticipating that we're not going to have the funds flowing into town hall that we once did, that with so many people unemployed, so many people not paying the property taxes, so many people not going out and buying goods and generating the sales tax, that I just don't see the state voluntarily giving up money for more, I don't want to say frivolous things, but we've got to cover, we need to keep every first responder on the payroll. The money's going to be short, and it's going to have to go to there first. Just the economy's going really bad.
Thank you. Candidate Strand.
You know, that question is another one that wouldn't be the same a month ago than it is now. You know, up until this crisis, this pandemic, we've all been looking optimistically for how we could participate and partner with the state to address local needs while deploying proper earnings from the legacy fund. But I'm not sure we're going to have much either to work with. My concern is that with the state's budget needs, that their priorities will become the highest priorities. I hope we're able to hold on to the Prairie Dog Fund so we can keep giving that $13 or so million relief annually to our property owners who are having infrastructure and special assessments projects done in the neighborhood. But I just don't know. I think that the state's issues will be first. Our job will be to pull in our belts to be efficient and maybe not overly demand the state when we're all in the same boat.
Thank you. Candidate Boa.
I feel with the legacy fund, we have to be very smart about it on how we really share or distribute it. Like candidate John said, and also Doug, as well as Edward mentioned earlier, we have to be smart. Is there any going to be left over after this pandemic? A lot of people are looking to us after this to see what exactly we're going to be able to do with that. So maybe having a case-by-case study within the next coming months to just see what exactly is our number one priority. We can't go just spending the money on any project that is not of the people, for the people, to uplift the people. So that would be my number one.
Thank you. Candidate Preston.
Yeah, the legacy fund, as I understand it, is designed to be a rainy day fund. And if this isn't a rainy day, I don't know what is. So I would hope that after all of the federal programs are implemented and we know exactly what kind of federal dollars are going to come to help get us whole again, that if indeed that does not do the complete job, that the legacy fund could be tapped in to fill that in. Long term, and that's where I think the long-term ideas for tapping into this fund may be a little bit tougher, but certainly workforce housing. Again, I go back to that. The need to build housing options for people to be able to afford. And then childcare issues. That's a thing that we've been struggling with to keep our workforce and to recruit a workforce that fills the jobs that we have open, which up to this point, we had a lot of them in this state. So those two issues are the ones that I would hope that we could make some headway on.
Thank you. Candidate Greenberg.
I'll start out by saying the glass is half full, and certainly we have challenges in the near future, but we have to be optimistic that over time, and to Ms. Preston's point about the federal stimulus and the federal spending, one's got to believe that depending on the time, we're going to come out of this economically stronger. Granted, that's going to take some time, but that's what we have to believe, and we have to achieve that. As I noted earlier, being in the legislature for many years, I was one of the sponsors of the Renaissance Zone legislation that has far exceeded our expectations and what impact that's made to all communities across the state that participate in that. And so having said that, I also testified to the Interim Legacy Funds Earning Committee in November, and what was clear by the 80 or 90 in the room is there's a lot of ideas. And so define legacy, impact generationally. And so I'm proposing as part of that state and local is a legacy zone to build on the Renaissance zones to address affordable housing and revitalize our core neighborhoods. And so that's one of the things I'll be advocating for in the future.
Thank you. Our next question goes to candidate Doug Rimpf. What should be done to ensure the quality of our core neighborhoods across Fargo?
That's a good question. I think the first thing that we have to think about doing is enforcing our zoning regulations. We've seen what's happened to the Roosevelt neighborhood. The residents said, we do not want this monstrosity. You drive down University Avenue and it's there. And some people just were like lapdogs for the land developers, and they said, we're going to do this. Not only are we going to do this, but we're going to give them $1,250,000 in city money to do so, for a building that people don't want. We're going to tell the land developers no when they need to be told no, and they're not being told now when they should be told no.
Thank you. Candidate Strand.
Thank you very much. That question really is a key question for people in Fargo and core neighborhoods. Is something that is front burner as a priority focus right now. Long story short, we've let our land development code, we've let our strategic neighborhood plans, we've let some of our planning and zoning policies kind of sit on the shelf, and they needed to be updated. We are doing those updates right now, and they're going to be very critical. What's really important is that we engage our neighborhoods and the people in these core neighborhoods at the table. So they're helping shape these policies so we don't end up with these fights between a neighborhood and a developer because we're in limbo with our policies. That said, we're visiting our policies, but we need to step up our incentives for rehabbing homes. The Roosevelt neighborhood, for example, has over 70% of the people renting. Let's figure out how to get them to ownership and get them improved and turn them into single-family homes again.
Thank you. Candidate Bullock.
I believe that what happened was basically the power was taken out of the people's hand. And we're not listening as city commissioner. We're not hearing what the people want, and our job is to serve the people. That's what they elected us for. So when they tell us things such as they don't want certain things in their neighborhood, we need to be accountable for those things. We need to put on our listening ear. We're here to serve them, and hold the developer accountable for a lot of things. Like he said, they're going over some things right now, but let's see what that brings up. But once again, are we not here to serve the people? We are. So we need to keep them first and foremost in all of our decision making.
Thank you. Candidate Preston.
Yeah, I think there's a number of things actually that could be done. I'm active with the Neighborhood Coalition, and one of the items that they have set as a goal is a rental registry. There's been so many single-family homes that have been converted into rental properties, and with that, there have been issues. Incentives for rehabbing homes needs to be increased. The core neighborhood plan that Commissioner Strand referred to is in the process, and one of the things that I'm concerned about, and the whole core neighborhood group is concerned about, is that this will be another plan that will be developed, but then nothing done with. So we have to make sure that that plan is founded in public input, which the process looks great right now. It's happening, but then we have to make sure that that's implemented. The redevelopment projects that are happening have to fit into the neighborhood. So again, that whole issue of strengthening the planning process and ensuring that the zoning is predictable and is consistent with the neighborhood.
Thank you. Candidate Greenberg.
To add to Commissioner Strand's overview, both he and I were part of the search and selection of the consultant leading the core neighborhood plan. And we would both agree that a bottoms-up approach will work, bringing the ideas forward and the solutions and recommendations to move forward and actually move action items forward to make a difference. So we're looking forward to that project being completed by the end of the year, as well as a revision of the land development code. You know, I'm not an economics major, but I think largely this is an opportune time to step up, to provide the tools, advocate for that, whether it's local or state, to make a difference. And my point of the economics is that for many years, the growth at NDSU has very steadily grown to a point where more students and more demand on housing. If you've followed the data, enrollment is dropping. And so I think that's going to put different demands on housing around the University Roosevelt neighborhood that allow the opportunity for us to reinvest in a single family.
Thank you. Candidate Edward Kostosek.
So I want to bring one number forward. 60% of the population of Fargo lives in an apartment building, and there's one reason for that. They can't afford housing. And they can't afford housing for a multitude of reasons, and knocking on 300 doors to get my name on the petition to nominate to get on this ballot, overwhelmingly, everybody said the money I could do if I had just a little bit of top property tax relief. I could invest in my home, I could repair my home, I could put in new windows, I could update siding, I could redo my yard. All the things that we're talking about making core neighborhoods appealing to live in, but they cannot afford to do it. We can't get people out of apartment housing because they can't afford the mortgage payment when we've got property taxes so high that it's tipping their monthly mortgage payment beyond their limits. So that is, again, we got to get those people out of apartments into affordable housing, into nice neighborhoods that they can manage the monthly payment on. And without that, all the core neighborhood talk is just that, it's talk, because people can't afford it. We have to provide incentives to improve on their buildings, to put in new windows and make all their updates.
Thank you. And our next question goes to candidate John Strand, who's joining us remotely. How can the Fargo City Commissioners lead and partner with others for economic development? This could include what you think is currently working and what might not be working.
Wow, that's a broad question. Economic development is so many different fronts. We have, for example, we have incentives right now in the Renaissance Zone incentives. We have TIFs incentives, tax increment financing. We have payments in lieu of taxes incentives for creating new jobs, primary sector jobs, and also we have pilots for apartments in the downtown mixed use and in the NDSU area. So how do we make them work? I think the biggest thing we need to do is with these incentives, one of the elements I'd like to add to the discussion is when you do get incentives for apartments, for example, how do we add affordable apartments to that discussion? That would be something that would help them work better for workforce development. I have concerns with some of our incentives right now, but the main thing is we go forward and we keep thinking big and build for the future.
Thank you. Candidate Rochelle Aboa.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Certainly. How can the Fargo City Commissioners lead and partner with others for economic development? This could include what you think is currently working and what might not be working.
Fargo can lead by inviting, like I said, investor, like-minded investor who have the same ethics and values that we hold so strongly here in our Fargo area, that will come in and help develop, especially housing, that will help bring out jobs so we can retain our graduates, so they are able to get the job and be able to pay student loans back and live affordably. I'm part of that 60% that you mentioned that rents in an apartment. So using some of these incentives to like highlight new homeowners and starter programs and several different other options, as well as helping single mothers, and also going into it where we're building our city back up with buildings that is historic and near and dear to our hearts.
Thank you. Candidate Preston?
You know, I just heard statistic on the radio just the other day that 95% of businesses, and this is on the national level, but I'm assuming it's probably pretty pertinent for our community as well. 95% of businesses on the national level are under 100 employees, and 80% are under 10. I don't think our economic development initiatives or programs have focused very much on those, what you would call micro businesses. They're smaller, much smaller businesses, but they're also businesses that grow organically from our community. So I would love to work with the partners in this economic development arena to try to boost the entrepreneurial kind of efforts that are happening, and most of them are at a very small micro business level.
Thank you. Candidate Greenberg?
First, in my experience in economic development, government doesn't do economic development, they're a partner. And I'm a big believer in public-private partnerships. That's been the case for years with the Fargo Cass County, or Greater Fargo-Moorhead EDC now, and the Chamber of Commerce of Fargo-Moorhead, West Fargo. They've recently launched a Fueling the Future initiative, which really brings a vision to the community about economic development, whether that's job creation or investment in key community strategies, discussion around the convention center or performing arts center. That really is a place for the city to support as a public-private endeavor. And then the whole entrepreneurship ecosystem that's really blossomed over the last decade, 15 years. Traditional economic development back when I started was recruitment and expansion, and now entrepreneurship is a key part of that. And look at the success of the Emerging Prairie as a model to encourage entrepreneurship, to start small businesses, to complement job growth, and move us forward.
Thank you.
Hard to do that
Candidate
in a minute.
Christosek?
So, to comment on previous comments of the other candidates, TIFs, pilots, and incentives, that's one thing that, again, I hate to beat a dead horse because that's what it sounds like what I'm doing, but of all the people that I've talked to, their number one concern is why am I paying through the nose for property taxes and special assessments, and we're giving TIFs, pilots, and incentives to huge, wealthy companies in this city for 20 plus years. It's a huge concern for them, and it's very disheartening when you get your tax statement in the mail and then you hear about all the tax incentives and pilots and TIFs that are going out to all these big companies. I have no problem with those incentives with smaller companies or smaller businesses. You know, the micro businesses, as was discussed, it's a great idea, but these huge companies that are getting all these incentives, I don't agree with it. And we need to not be spending money where we don't need it. I hear about we're running out of snow removal budget in January, yet we're talking about building $78 million performing arts centers, of which half the city is being asked to spend. We don't have the money for that. We need to be a little more fiscally responsible. I don't support that at this time because we just don't have it.
Thank you. Candidate Rimpf?
Ed brings up a very good point, and that is when we give TIFs to people like the high-rise going up in downtown Fargo, and they are excused from paying for our schools, excused from paying for our police officers, and excused from paying for our fire protection. Who is it that's paying? Everybody else. We're raising everybody else's property taxes. I would like to know how much lower my property taxes would be if we weren't doing this TIF thing and giving all this money away to these wealthy people. It's sort of like a reverse Robin Hood. We're taking from the poor and middle class, and we're giving to wealthy people. I say way too much TIF stuff.
Okay. Before we go on to the next question, which we'll start with Rachel, I'll get it yet. Just a reminder for those of you that are watching at home, kind of partway through this, that earlier this afternoon, we received an email that Bradford Schaefer has withdrawn his candidacy, so that's why he is not joining us for tonight's event. So just wanted to let everyone know who's watching that he has withdrawn his name per an email we received earlier today. So with that, we'll go to you then. What should the city of Fargo do to ensure safety in neighborhoods across Fargo and safety in downtown Fargo too?
Thank you for that question. The city of Fargo needs to make sure we are properly setting up our law enforcement. We're definitely gonna compete with those outside cities such as Moorhead and West Fargo in pay. We need to definitely think about those who put their life at risk every single day to ensure that ours is safe. We need to give them the best support out there, as well as making sure we go out there properly equipped, giving them the knowledge and the resource that they need to go ahead and interact with those who are not their normal people that they would interact with, as well as, like I said, going out there with the best resource, putting them out in the streets as well as downtown Fargo, ensuring them that, especially the weekends that is busy, that we have efficient police officer out there.
Thank you. Candidate Arlette Preston.
The best way to accomplish a safe feeling in a neighborhood is truly to get the police officers out of their cars and on the sidewalks and intermingling with the neighborhood. So community-oriented policing, which I believe is really making a big renaissance back in the, or a big return back into the police department and how they're functioning, has been great. And you can see it downtown. I'm hoping that it's also happening in the other neighborhoods, but certainly we see it downtown. Getting police officers out of the car so that they get to be known by the neighborhood just makes a huge difference and makes it feel much safer.
Thank you. Candidate Tony Grimberg.
Great question. First, I'd like the viewers to understand that the people who we employ at the city of Fargo are world-class professionals. And you take that to the department heads, the job they do on behalf of the citizens is remarkable. And I've learned that over the last 4 years. Chief Todd, who leads our police department, has a specific plan. It's a 10-year plan, and we regularly engage on progress of that 10-year plan to community policing, to investment in retaining and recruiting law enforcement officers, and how many officers to add with community growth. So when you come to city government and you look at the management of our resources and the talent that we have, certainly there are issues that come up that cause attention, and some of that's been downtown. I can tell you that if there's something that happens in an evening and it makes the press, the next morning we're all talking about it. And in the fact of bringing the police station back downtown with the Mercantile Project is one of those areas that voices from the citizens have been heard, so that the City of Fargo Police Department has a presence in downtown.
Thank you. Candidate Edward Kristosek.
So that's part of being in a neighborhood, is feeling safe in that neighborhood. If you're not feeling safe in your neighborhood, it's a problem. And with my military experience, I can tell you that I notice a lot of things. And I notice a lot of things because the Army taught me to do that. I spent 2 tours overseas, and they taught me to look over my shoulder and keep aware of my surroundings. I love the idea of community-oriented policing, and I'm all for it, and I support it 100%, but we need more police officers to do that. Too many times I sit out on my deck in South Fargo and I hear the motorcycles and the cars racing up and down 52nd, and they know that because there isn't a police car within an earshot of it. We need to have more officers on the ground to do that. But something I never see in the city of Fargo is any kind of public advertising of any kind of self-awareness training, how to let the citizens take care of themselves. And I'm not talking about going out and arming everybody. If they want to do that, that's fine, that's their decision, but we need to have some kind of programs through the schools or through something to teach these kids, hey, keep an eye on your surroundings. If you see a strange car, make sure you walk away from it, stay with a friend, stay with a group, be safe, and take personal responsibility to be safe. And that's a big portion of what we can do to feel safe in our own communities.
Thank you. Next candidate, Doug Rimpf.
I'm very pleased with our police department. I believe that they do a great job. And the answer to this question is, I think, fairly simple. And it's been suggested to already, it's police officers being more visible and more numerous. And that's pretty much it, so it's a short answer.
Thank you. Next up, candidate John Strand.
Thank you. You know, I'm going to join with Commissioner Grinberg and others. We have amazingly good people providing us public safety, whether they're wearing a police uniform or a fire uniform or whatever. But that said, you know, a safe neighborhood begins with a safe home, with people who have a roof over their heads, they have food on their table and in their fridge, they have good jobs, they have paying jobs, they're secure, they're not at risk. That's where safety begins. If we don't have homelessness, if we address public behavioral health challenges, if we address health issues like opioids or right now this pandemic, that's the core of safety. So good jobs, good homes, good income, good neighborhoods, good public support systems, good water, good streets, good curbs, it all adds up. Then we're burdening our police department less with these problems that I assure you will bubble up if we're not on top of our basic games of taking care of people one day at a time, every day.
Thank you. The next question begins with candidate Arlette Preston, and it relates to infrastructure. What should Fargo do with aging infrastructure, and how should any replacement costs be paid for?
Wow, that's a big question. Well, so when I was on the commission back before, 20 years ago, we started to put some additional funding into infrastructure. And give you a good example, we had 100 years of replacing water lines going into the downtown area, and that has been expedited tremendously. So we've made huge improvements in that way. However, there's still a lot of challenges and a lot of improvements to be made. You know, I think the City Commission, as the changes that were made probably close to a year ago now, where special assessments were put on the neighborhoods to fund some of the arterial reconstruction, was a big mistake, and I think everybody realized that, so they backed off of it. And now the special assessments are much more in line. You know, sales tax revenue continues to go into infrastructure as well as special assessments. And at this point, I guess I wouldn't have any further suggestions about funding.
Thank you. Next candidate, Tony Grinberg.
Yeah, you know, to add to that, you know, the voters years ago approved sales tax for infrastructure, replacement of, you know, core infrastructure, and that has been continuing for many years. The recent decisions we made to a new policy with state funds called the Prairie Dog are going to lessen the special assessment burden on those neighborhoods that receive a new water, street, sewer repairs. Significantly decrease because of the state support that will ultimately make our way here. And so those are the things to kind of keep in mind, that the infrastructure has to be upgraded, and that's what the citizens chose years ago. And then to minimize that impact to individual property tax payers will all make a difference in the long run to keep City of Fargo moving forward.
Thank you. Next up, Edward Christosek. Sorry.
It's okay. So yeah, aging infrastructure, we need to keep up on it, and it needs to be repaired. I mean, if you can't get water coming out of the tap in your kitchen, it's kind of a useless point. And it does need to be paid for. And here's where fiscal responsibility comes in. Not spending money on things we don't need. Things like $78 million performing arts centers, or whatever the number is now. It's an exorbitant amount of money we're talking about. Applying that money into infrastructure, rather. I love the arts, don't get me wrong. I have two daughters in dance, and it's part of our lives, but we just simply don't have the money, and that money could be easily more diverted into something like infrastructure repairs. Last year, we were supposed to, and hopefully we get the $13 million worth of infusion from the Prairie Dog Fund. Oddly enough, the CIP went up $10 million, the capital improvement projects. which hopefully that's going towards aging infrastructure, but that's not really known. I didn't really see where it's going to be utilized. We just have to be fiscally responsible and use the money that we have, pay for the things that we need, and not be spending money on things that we don't need.
Thank you. Candidate Rimpf.
I'm relatively satisfied with our infrastructure, or at least compared to other cities. In summer times in Fargo, you see roads under construction, it's inconvenient, nobody likes the inconvenience, but it means we're keeping up with our infrastructure. There are a lot of similar cities, similar size, that are not. They don't have the stuff going on in the summer. I think this is one of the things that Fargo should pat itself on the back. Do we have infrastructure that still needs to be done? But at least we're working on it, and there's so many other cities that are doing nothing. We're going where we should.
Thank you. Candidate Strand.
Thank you very much. You know, this question of infrastructure is a complex one, but we can simplify it. I think it boils down to smart growth. When you can manage growth, you can manage your infrastructure costs better. If we have and allow, which we have too often, leapfrog growth over to the edge of the city, there's consequences to that, which increase costs, which increase our risks, and I wouldn't advocate for that. Another aspect of smart growth is to don't kick the can down the road too far. Make sure you're doing your maintenance now while it's current, because I assure you it will only get more expensive later on, and it still has to be done. Another aspect of smart growth in infrastructure is to step up our infill. If we do more growth in our inner city and grow upward instead of outward, we're taking advantage of the already existing infrastructure to a degree and benefiting from previous generations' investments. So smart growth is what it boils down to, managing our growth.
Candidate Aboa.
Thank you so much for that. A smart, like candidate John said earlier, growing upward will then allow us to go ahead and focus on what we have already structured and not wait until the last minute where it gets way more expensive, where we're now located and where will we find that money. So what we need to do is think smarter. Go ahead and take care of the problem right before our hands, before it gets too late. Way where we could find that money is the Prairie Dog Fund. We could definitely look into that more, as well as looking at, I keep saying it, outside investors to come in. That will also bring more businesses to the area as well.
Thank you. The next question goes to candidate Tony Grinberg. The question is, we have more than 30,000 college students living in the metro area. What can or should the city of Fargo do to make this a place where those students want to live, learn, and stay here afterwards for work?
You know, the efforts that, whether it's enhancing the arts, enhancing quality of life, job opportunities, opportunities to, raise a family, those are all key attractive items for individuals who want to put down roots. And, over time, our tri-college system has clearly been a magnet for people putting down roots by choosing NDSU or one of our other institutions. As I've always chuckled over the years, the mother-in-law rule: a gentleman finds a young lady and puts down roots and they start a family. Those are important attributes of the university system as a draw to our community. And so creating, enhancements to quality of life, the age of the internet, you can have conversations with anybody on your phone now. The point is that you no longer have to leave to have the amenities, because in our region we've adapted and we've added those amenities over time, and I think that makes a difference. And certainly the university system that we have is part of that magnet.
Thank you. Candidate Christosik.
So we want to keep these students here, and that is very much true. And much to Tony's point, quality of life is extremely important, but we also need to have a job here for them. If they don't have a job, there's no reason for them to stay. The job, right now, we're at a point in unemployment in Fargo. Well, with COVID, it's slightly different because so many people are off work and businesses have closed. But when we get beyond this or previous to this, we had an almost non-existent unemployment rate. we need to bring those businesses in, and we need to bring those people in who want to open those businesses, again, focusing on those micro businesses. The big businesses are nice, don't get me wrong, we need those as well, but let's bring in those micro businesses, but we got to make it affordable for them to come here. We got to make that housing affordable for them to come here. We got to make Fargo a desirable place to live, not only culturally, but we also need to make it desirable financially. If they cannot afford to live here, they're going to leave. If they don't have a job when they get done with school, they're going to leave.
Thank you. Candidate Rimpf.
I've been privileged to work with graduates of NDSU and to help them make the decisions of what they're doing at graduation. And none of them have said to me, well, gee, what's the arts program in Fargo? They're all looking at salaries, job security, the quality of the job, and it's the jobs that have traditionally been the number one concern of all the students that I've worked with, and so I would encourage us to acquire the kinds of jobs that these graduating students want.
Thank you. Candidate Strand.
This question of our college students is pretty critical to Fargo's future. Fargo, Moorhead, West Fargo. Our student population is not increasing, and whether it will increase is in the balance. We may have significant changes in higher ed, more distance learning and more remote learning, like we're seeing right now in this pandemic. So I'm concerned. I'm concerned about the implications. But let's go back to the students who are here and come here for college. I'd love to see them set down their roots in Fargo, buy a home, grow their families here, get into a neighborhood where they can be part of the community. Many of these students are heavily burdened with significant student loans. As a community, it would be wise for us to figure out how to help them lessen that burden of student loans. And one option might be to have a shared mortgage down payment program to help them get into ownership. As a community, we'll invest with them, things of that nature.
Thank you. Candidate Boa.
Thank you so much. A way to retain our college student. This is a subject I am very passionate about just because this is something where it's really near and dear to my heart. All of us, we are worried about making $15 after paying how many thousand in student loans. We have no roots to really secure us here. Housing, looking at a way to buy a new house, you can't be broke and own a house. You can't be broke and have a family. You can't be in debt and start anything. So our main focus right now is to retain our college graduate, is to work with local businesses and jobs to see if the minimum wage, it needs to be raising. We need to compensate those who goes to school for 4 years or more. Our international students that come and contribute to our society, we need to find a proper living situation for them or some type of grant in place for us to retain these people to help with our society. We need to have affordable housing. There's a lot of students who can't afford the place that they're living or being pushed out of their community that they're at right now. So those would be the main things that we need to do to retain.
Thank you. Candidate Preston.
Well, to retain and attract young professionals or young workers, it really goes back to my 3 top priorities, that being we have to ensure a thriving workforce, which means looking at our wages. Even though our unemployment rate has been extremely low, our wages have not responded. So that needs to be studied. Secondly, in regards to that is affordable housing, which I've talked about quite a bit. And then thriving neighborhoods, as well as a thriving workforce and thriving families. All of those issues under those 3 concepts are required to be able to recruit and retain young people. Multiple cultural and arts activities, as well as I mentioned earlier, open, welcoming kind of community, and that needs to be voiced from the city leadership right up here.
Thank you. The next question is for candidate Edward Christosek, and it's a longer question. Remember, you randomly drew for your locations, but it comes down to things related to home ownership, okay? Just so the candidates know. I mean, that's the nub of the question. Takes a little while to get there. Home ownership is an important component across our country, our community. There are city and state programs for people living in homes. Those homeowners are supported by a number of tax exemption and/or credits, such as homestead tax credits available to senior citizens and the disabled, disabled veterans credit, residential new construction for programs for owners and builders, programs for wheelchair-bound citizens, programs for visually impaired, and programs for remodeling of buildings that are 25 years and older. The question for you is, what are your thoughts on these programs, and what program changes, if any, would you advocate for as a Fargo City Commissioner for residential home owners?
I'll start off by
Took me
saying,
a while to get there, but we got there, okay?
we got there,
I'm
and
guessing
I wrote it down.
every other person's going to want me to repeat it probably, so yeah, thank you.
First off, let me say, I fully support everything you just talked about. Absolutely everything. We should have those incentives in place. In fact, that's where the incentives should go. Not necessarily to the big businesses that want to come here and open. They need to go to the people who need the help. In fact, to be completely truthful and honest, I had a discussion today with a state legislator. Why don't we expand that? People are screaming about property taxes in the city of Fargo and how expensive it is to live here. Why don't we advocate for the state doing more of an expansion of that tax credit to, say, somebody up into the middle class wages, say maybe $115,000 a year. If you pay if you get paid X number of dollars a year, you can file for a tax refund against your property taxes. I say expand it. I'm all for it. Let's give some property tax relief. That, since 2012, that has been the primary concern of the residents in Fargo. And again, I'm beating a dead horse, but it all boils down to whether people can afford to live in this city or not. I say, yes, great, I'm for it all. As a vet, I'm for it. But let's expand it. Let's make it more accessible to more people.
Thank you. Candidate Rimpf.
The property taxes can be a really cruel tax, and a lot of people struggle to pay it. You think about people on Social Security or whatever. Our state's homestead exemption program, I'm a big fan of, and what I would suggest is expanding the homestead exemption, such that in the homestead exemption, the amount of property tax relief that citizens get is based on their income. And why not expand that from the current homestead exemption, which deals only with the elderly or the disabled, and expand that to everybody that has a low income such that they have difficulty paying property taxes, that maybe we open it up the homestead exemption to all.
Thank you. Candidate Strand.
Thank you very much. Housing and affordable housing is maybe the highest priority focus I've had in my last 4 years. And I'll preface it, and this was alluded to before, but almost 60% of the people in Fargo now rent versus own their own homes. Back in 1989 or 1990, 60% of people in Fargo owned their own homes. So we've had a paradigm shift, and we need to turn that boat around. I'm very focused on affordable housing, and especially in neighborhoods. I've led the charge to create a cast clay community land trust, which will step up home ownership in an affordable way. We're partnering with Habitat for Humanity, Rebuilding Fargo, Beyond Shelter, and Fargo Housing Authority. That will be a key element of affordable housing. I also want incentives put onto tax breaks given to apartment builders for adding affordable housing to their projects. Lastly, I would like Fargo to step up significantly the tax break for building new homes from 2 to 5 years.
Candidate Aboa.
Thank you very much for that. I like what each and every one of you guys said, and I can't agree more with everything. we need to really focus on affordable housing for everyone. Homestack plan, like candidate Doug said, would be good if we can go ahead and help those who are working and they can't afford these big breaks or are in that bracket. So maybe open it and expanding it more to everyone who isn't able to afford these property tax, as well as having some type of program set in place where those whose new home buyers are able to go into some type of course or some type of class to get these knowledge that will then be applied to their home or new home buyers, as well as extending that, like I said, to low income home and getting apartment complex and new developers to go ahead and work with less privilege.
Thank you. Candidate Arlette Preston.
I did a very cursory kind of study, just glanced at housing prices in Fargo-Moorhead, or Fargo actually, compared to Moorhead and West Fargo. But then I also looked at Sioux Falls and St. Cloud and Duluth and a number of regional cities. And for some reason, the average home price in Fargo was a bit higher than all of them except one. And then you add special assessments on top of that. Housing prices have gotten to be out of the reach of a lot of individuals, and I think that's probably truly why we've ended up with this inverted 60% renting, 40% home ownership. There was a study done back in 2006 that had a lot of really good recommendations. One of them was a housing fund. The community land trust would be another solution. There was another suggestion in that study called inclusionary zoning. I think we need to take that plan or that study back up on the table and look at those solutions and implement some of them.
Thank you. Candidate Greenberg.
Thank you. Just a few observations, and I think it was noted earlier, income growth has been lagging, and I think that's part of the affordable housing debate, is incomes haven't risen as the cost of construction has risen. And in Fargo, when you look at the lots and the developments, new homes that have been built on 50-foot lots, they're selling faster than the 80 and 100-foot lots. And so I think the future is going to be smaller lots. I mean, drive around many parts of our core neighborhoods, they're small lots. That was post-World War II. And then as time advanced, people wanted bigger yards. And that all has a cost that comes to it. The first-time homebuyers program has a threshold of around $84,000 a year to qualify, and around a $260,000 home. I think we need to, have advocacy for increasing that. Point was made earlier, and then something that I'm going to continue to work on is the legacy zone concept that will be one part of the solution for our affordable housing challenges as we go forward.
Thank you. Question number 10, for those of you keeping score at home, goes to candidate Doug Rimpf. What is your position on city support for the Performing Arts Center? How should it be paid for, and should the city help finance it? And do you have a preferred location? Should it be in where it should be placed if it were to be built?
I'm a little bit amused by this. Right now, I think with the huge fiscal minuses facing us that we unfortunately can't. Would I like to have one? Yes. But I just don't see us at this time being able to afford so. And one thing that amuses me is I went to the city council meeting a couple of months ago and they were talking about this, and every time our city council doesn't want to make a decision, they say, let's make a committee or let's hire some consultants. And our city council commission didn't want to make a decision, and so that's what they've done. This is sort of like a standard operating procedure for them, and I'm amused by it. Sorry, Tony, but it really is true. Tony, it's true that when the decisions are really hard, let's form a committee or let's hire a consultant, and nah.
Thank you. Candidate Strand.
This question of a performing arts center, it's almost in the same category as a convention center. And there's nothing wrong with our community thinking big and wanting to get to those next levels. And providing a performing arts center would do that on so many fronts, and so would a convention center do that. But that said, we need a community to do this, not just the government. We need everybody partnering. And if we can put our heads together and create a performing arts center, I would just celebrate it. You know, we're the community, we're the place, we're the home of Peggy Lee. We're the home of so many famous artists and musicians, and Lawrence Welk is from our neck of the woods. We have such a legacy of great music and great art and great theater and great performance, whether it's music or poetry or theater or acting. Let's celebrate it if and when we can with the community.
Thank you. Candidate Aboa.
Thank you so much for that. The reason why I'm smiling is because I was at the meeting that Doug talked so finely about. And my whole candidacy is ran off of I'm for the people. I want to be the voice that that they're able to come to. So I said, with this community center, let's give it to the people. Let's ask them, what do they want? Where do they want it? How do they want it? Is our main concern, and see if that's a problem on where exactly the funds is going to be coming from. Because if the community is okay with it and they want it in their community to attract more tourists, to bring people outside, then who are we? We work for the people. So put the, if I'm elected, I would definitely want to go ahead and have that be put on the ballot, where we ask the community this question and see what they want instead of what we want.
Candidate Preston.
I'm going to go back to the thriving workforce issue, in that if we're going to retain and attract young professionals, young individuals coming into the community, we have to have a diverse community that has a very active arts and cultural sector. And the Performing Arts Center is part of that. I served on the task force along with Commissioner Strand, and was real supportive of it being placed where the Civic Center currently is sitting. And the next step that was to be taken, and still needs to be taken, is having a consultant actually do an assessment in regard to the feasibility of actually getting community support, community dollars added into funding for this. So it's not going to happen unless that is there, and we need to make sure that that's there before we go forward. If it's there, I definitely want to see this thing happen.
Candidate Greenberg.
I think the citizens of Fargo look to us for a vision and what's the art of the possibility. When I look back in the negativity and those that were against the Fargo Dome, the Red Hawk Stadium, there was a lot of, just that's not right. And is a performing arts center right? I think that's part of the process that we have to set up so people have their voices heard, and that's just part of open government. I've said up here publicly that I will not support any measures of public funds until half of it's paid for by the private sector. And that's what's now underway, is to test the waters of, what will the market, was it $50 million project with $25 million in private? None of that can happen in my estimation until the private sector steps up. And my own personal belief, and the history of the Mid-America Steel site, and connecting the river in our history and the commerce that took place years ago with permanent flood protection. Imagine that site, and I differ with the task force. I love the Mid-America site for performing arts. I know it has some logistical issues, but those are the things I think people expect from us, is a vision and figure out how we're going to get there. And it might take a decade.
Thank you. Candidate Edward Christosek.
Again, I'll say that I'm all for the arts. I've got nothing against it. Like I said before, I've got 2 daughters in dance, and I know far more about dance makeup and Leos than any dance dad should ever know. But right at this point in time, I would not be for a performing arts center. I would be for it when Fargo is in a position with flood control. We've got our special assessments under control, again, beating the dead horse. We've got our property taxes under control, and there's an appetite by the people to build this thing. And I completely agree with Commissioner Greenberg in that, yes, if there's public sector funding for it and the people have the appetite for it, I'd be for it. We don't have that appetite right now. Again, I will revert back to, I talked to a lot of people before I put my name on the ballot. Every one of them said, we don't need this right now. It'd be nice to have, but it's not a need, it's a want. Eventually, someday down the line, I'd be all for it. Honestly, I don't really care where we build it. I'd just as soon not see them level the Civic. It's a perfectly functional building. I'd rather see it somewhere else, but right now, I'm not for it.
Thank you. The next question, again, is for all candidates. We're going to give you 90 seconds. It's a little more expanded. So that's like 90, not 120, just so keeping track at home. So 90 seconds, so a little additional time, and a two-part question related to COVID-19. What role should the city of Fargo play in responding to the current and future, or in any future health pandemics such as COVID-19? And how can the city of Fargo help with the recovery that we are currently, that needs to happen from what we're currently experiencing with the downturn from COVID-19? So again, what role should the city of Fargo play in this pandemic and future ones? And what can be done in this case to help in recovery efforts? And then the first person for this is candidate John Strand for 90 seconds.
All right, getting my mute button here. 4 years ago when I was elected to the Fargo City Commission, we had a different sort of crisis unfolding, and it was the opioid crisis. And we had people dying in numbers that were more than unsettling, and they were family members. A long story short, even though it was a national crisis, 2 years later, I was speaking at a panel at the National League of Cities, giving them stories and examples of what we did here in Fargo to address this pandemic or the crisis of the opioids. We did some remarkable things, and we really got involved. We got Narcan in all of the hands of all the law enforcement. We got a methadone clinic that was the gold standard. We got a harm reduction center so that people could get clean needles and not spread other diseases. We stepped up support for people in so many ways for treatment and help. That's a public health issue. Now we have another public health crisis. The first thing that Fargo needs to do is everybody, every single family needs to participate. Do your own jobs. Take care of each other. Socially distancing yourselves. Do not expose other people. Do your parts. That's the second thing that we need to do after that at the city level is bring people together for health and safety and for their welfare. We just have our hands full. We will be helping them recover from jobs, recovering from health, but we could talk for hours, but thanks everybody.
Candidate Aboa.
Thank you so much, and I definitely want to go ahead and I know this is a tragic time in our history, especially in Fargo, because we have not seen anything like that. So I definitely want to say my heart goes out to everybody who is definitely affected by this pandemic, and we're praying for you guys and hoping that you guys do get healed safe and back to your family. What we need to do is come together as a community. We have always done that. Fargo has always been a place of compassion and strong uplifting people. So we all need to do our general part, wash our hands, make sure we stay home when we're sick, make sure we are social distancing ourselves. But also we need to do wellness check. We need to call our friends and family. Being locked up in the house all day is not of our normal routine. So call and just say, hey, how are you doing? Just checking up on you, making sure everything is doing well. How's the kids? Everything. Sometimes you just need that somebody care about me to just get your day going. We also need to go ahead and make sure we have effective, proper gear that we are able to get. Maybe going up with some of these businesses that's able to go ahead and make more masks and things. Here in our Fargo area, we have a lot of talented people who are souls and do different things. So maybe getting in contact with them as well. And us as running for the city commissioner, or for me personally, just being out there and being a point of support. If anybody needs anything, I'm right here for you guys. That's my number one job.
Candidate Preston.
There's three things that have to be in place before this community is going to, or any community is going to feel safe in going out again. One is comprehensive testing, and The access to the testing tools is probably something that the city could be involved in trying to coordinate, but that's going to probably come through state as well as healthcare providers. The second is contact tracing. So once a person is tested positive, we've got to have the personnel and the expertise to be able to do that contact tracing. The public health department in the city of Fargo plays a big part, a big role there. Third is isolation. Once a person has been diagnosed and is active, they need to be isolated. So making sure to check in with people to make sure that they're still doing okay, and delivering food and medicines or whatever else. The city of Fargo certainly plays a big coordination role, perhaps, between the health providers to make sure we have a comprehensive, consistent approach to this whole thing, but also communication with the public, and that's probably the biggest thing. Using the bully pulpit to make sure that people understand what they need to do, their role that they need to play in the public, as well as how they can help others that are going through this. So I would say the communication piece is probably one of the biggest roles that the city can play.
Thank you. Candidate Tony Greenberg.
Agree wholeheartedly with Arlette on communication, paramount. You know, we've all learned as elected officials, city staff, citizens of Fargo, something we've never dealt with before. And I remember the morning I sat in with Mayor Mahoney with the department heads on a Friday. That afternoon, actually, presidential national declaration, emergency declaration was made. And I remember the conversations about the directive Friday to come back Monday with all the various departments on coordination, core infrastructure, operations, fire and police. What's our plan? And some of that was predicated on what we learned with flood fighting. But at the end of the day, it was about what's our message? When do we communicate that? Because many look up to the city of Fargo as the leading largest city. City of Moorhead, Cass County, city of West Fargo. What we say matters. And then unlike a flood emergency, this has national, state, and local implications that we all need to be hand-locked in that messaging so that we don't send confusion or panic to the public. And I got to tell you, I was very proud of Mayor Mahoney and how we've handled this thus far with that coordination, that effort behind the scenes, and it was advocated in the consistent messaging. And so is that going to prepare us for the next pandemic? You know, we'll see. I hope it never comes. But as far as recovery, we've been working with the area nonprofits to identify what their resources are and how they can provide assistance in the areas of housing and food, as well as the federal funding that we're going to receive as the CARES Act to complement that to help people through this.
Thank you. Candidate Kristosek.
So I have to completely agree with Candidate Preston and Candidate Grimberg. Communication is key. As long as people know what's going on and they're getting good, valid, true-to-life information, they're going to feel better about what's going on, and they're going to feel like, hey, this means something and this is important. As far as for future pandemics, I mean, in this situation, the city of Fargo is kind of at the mercy of the state. The governor shut us down. We didn't shut ourselves down. All we can do is support our businesses and support our people as best we can when that comes down. So I think the city has actually done a very good job of doing that. They've relaxed some city ordinances. They've let restaurants deliver a couple of beers with a meal when they do deliveries. I think that's outstanding. I certainly hope they expand that. I did watch the last city commission meeting. I do hope they expand that and allow it permanently. And that's going to be necessary to get these businesses back on their feet, because a lot of the businesses that are struggling right now are the restaurants and they are the bars that serve food. And if we can allow them that extra little bit of income to help get themselves back on their feet, that's part of the role that we need to play in getting them back on their feet, and to advocate for support of local business and to get people to go out and I'm a person who spends a lot of time on the road and I eat a lot of restaurant food. But I find myself eating restaurant food more because I want to support the businesses in this city, and we do it pretty much every weekend now. It's a ritual. Every Saturday night we do takeout. So I think the city's doing really good on what they're doing, and I think if we continue that path in the future, we can get back on our feet.
Thank you. Candidate Rimpf.
I appreciate Rochelle's comments, which were more towards the city commission. Our commissioners should be positive role models for the community, and Rochelle was certainly talking about the kind of behaviors that we would like to see our city commissioners model that would be most helpful. Because frankly, the city's role is rather limited compared to that of the feds and the state. And anyhow, I'm on board with Rochelle's comments.
Okay, thank you. We are now coming up on our last question before we have your closing remarks. The last question is actually a yes or no, one-word answer. So we don't need the timing, so you don't have to say, just anything but yes or no. Relates to the FM diversion construction. The question being, do you support the construction of the Fargo-Moorhead diversion? Yes or no? Starting with Rochelle.
Yes, I definitely do.
Candidate Preston.
Yes.
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 Candidate Strand. Let's turn your mic on so we get it for, I can read your lips.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. And the speed round is a little tough to kind of keep up with that sometime. So now we're going to have closing remarks for 2 minutes, up to 2 minutes for candidates for your closing remarks. And you're welcome to cover anything that you maybe didn't have enough time to cover during the other portions that you were assigned to. And with this one, we'll start with candidate Arlette Preston, followed by candidate Tony Grinberg, and down the line.
First of all, I want to thank the DCP for doing this. Since no other group is able to bring us together, I'm glad you did that. As a city commissioner, I will work to ensure thriving neighborhoods, thriving workforce, and thriving families. That includes strengthening our community with more affordable housing options, including property tax relief for especially the elderly who are trying to age in place at home, and providing incentives to uplift our aging neighborhoods. My first priority will be to get our citizens back to work and our employers and entrepreneurs up and running again after this challenging pandemic. I will work to ensure living wages and workforce training to meet the needs of the job market. Childcare access and availability is central to the ability for families to thrive, for neighborhoods to thrive, and for the workforce to thrive. So that's something that I would work to improve. I'm running for the City Commission to bring a fresh perspective and diversified experience to that team. I believe my background, my proven leadership, and my history of serving the elderly and their families will bring a new voice to the decision-making on our commission. I ask for your support and your vote. I am a mother, I am a nurse, former business owner, and an experienced community leader. I am ready to go to work for you and your family. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Tony Grinberg.
Well, I echo as well the opportunity and my gratitude for the opportunity tonight. And I'm excited about the city of Fargo's future. I decided to run for re-election on 4 basic pillars, that being infrastructure, completing the FM diversion, and seeing that through as a former lawmaker, which had the opportunity to write the blueprint for the state funding, and now serving as the finance chair of the Diversion Authority to see that project through. Also continuing to move forward, adequate water supply to move our city forward. Talking about jobs and growth, continuing moving our great community, providing opportunities, addressing the challenges that come around that with affordable housing and workforce. Workforce is one of the areas that I've been very versed in experience in my tenure in the economic development profession, as well as public safety. I think that's one of the top things that people have on their minds is, are we making sure we're providing adequate coverage and continuing to find the best and the brightest that protect our citizens? And that is one of the areas that I think and wholeheartedly believe we need to continue to move forward. And then as well, the core neighborhood. I served in the legislature many years, and much like a macro level approach to legislating and providing state statute and appropriations to help communities, I'm now on the micro side. What does that mean for a community where your impact, your decisions matter instantaneously in some cases? And so my vision for applying what I've learned from my role of 4 years on the liaison to the Planning Commission to move core neighborhood strategies forward And so I'm a father of 3 as well. They've grown and they've challenged me at times, and they keep saying, Dad, you need to spend more time on Facebook and video messages. So look forward to that, see if they get their way. Again, thank you for the opportunity, and Fargo's future is bright.
Thank you. Candidate Edward Christosek.
I too would like to thank the Downtown Community Partnership for this. With the COVID-19 out there, it's just really hard to campaign in a traditional way, knocking on doors, shaking hands, talking to people. It's to the point I don't even want to hang anything on people's doorknobs. So this is the only way we can get our message out. I'd like to reiterate to everybody listening, full disclosure, I'm not a career politician. I'm your average middle-class guy who's concerned about the future of Fargo and its financial well-being of the citizens. And I just want to do what's in everybody's best interest, not just one group of people, everybody in the entire city. I'm one of the only candidates who has vehemently spoken about lowering property taxes and lowering special assessments. And it's not what I think, it's what I know. The people I have talked to have said this to me time and time again. We cannot afford to keep paying these kind of taxes. I'm here for the people. I'm not here for the notoriety. I'm not here for the prestige. I'm just here for the opportunity to serve the city as best as I possibly can and serve the people who choose to call Fargo home. I think I'm the only candidate who's publicly pledged to repay everything I've been given in campaign contributions to a local Fargo charity. I think I'm also the only candidate who's pledged to give back a portion of my salary to a local Fargo charity. I believe in that. That's how much I believe in needing a voice for the people on the city commission. Do I know everything? Absolutely not. I venture to say nobody on this commission and nobody on this candidate panel knows everything. It's impossible. You can't possibly do it. Do I have things to learn? Absolutely. I do have things to learn. My experience in the military, my experience working with bigger businesses and smaller businesses and working through all the jobs that I've had, I think it puts me in a really good position to understand the perspective of everybody through the whole chain of citizens in this city to know what they want and to advocate for what they want. I'd like to thank my wife and my family who's been very supportive, and all my friends and people who have donated to my campaign financially. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Doug Rimpf.
There are 2 important issues that really have not been addressed or had not been addressed until this closing session. Arlette touched on one of them, and that she called it the living wage. I would call it the minimum wage. Our minimum wage in Fargo has been $7.25 an hour for the last 21 years. That's less than Minnesota's $10. That's less than South Dakota's $9.30. That's less than in US dollars in Manitoba, it's $8.77. That we really need to get working on that. And then the second thing, and I bet our friend John Strand touches on it next. John, if I may put some words in your mouth, but we have not talked about climate change. You gonna talk about that, John? Yeah, I thought so. Okay, but clearly it's a major problem that we need to be doing something about, and our city commission has been doing nothing. Now, I think John's going to talk about maybe some kind of goal. Goals are nice, but we need to do something concrete. We need to move in concrete ways to do this, and we can't do it alone. Clearly, it needs to be everybody on board, people, the feds, the state, and everything, but we need to get going on that. And I'll conclude by saying, thanks to the Downtown Partnership. Thank you for having us here. This has been fun.
Thank you. Candidate John Strand joining us remotely.
Thank you. And Doug, you were absolutely right. You must be psychic. You know, one of the things I've learned is when I address and talk about the issues of flood protection and droughts, people understand that. But I've also learned to put it in the context of climate action, because us protecting our metropolitan community from erratic, crazy flood cycles is climate action. And us protecting our community so that we don't have drought cycles and no water is climate action. Those are necessary actions for us to protect our economic engine going forward. So yes, I am talking climate, but we're not used to talking about the FM diversion in the context of climate. So thanks, Doug, for that precursor to that little message from me. You know, thanks to the DCP for putting this on. I've been downtown for a chunk of my adult life, and we're all in a great community. We have so much to offer, and we've got so much behind us that shows successes that indicate we can do what we put our minds to doing. No doubt we have a great community, but we have challenges. There's no doubt we have great people, but we have issues to address. Affordable housing, good neighborhoods, public and behavioral health issues, prison reform, treating addictions, reducing the stigmas, addressing climate actions. These are all needs of our community. But first and foremost, we need people to feel safe and to feel protected and to feel that they're welcome and that they're included and that they're respected. Every single person in our community. We all do better when we all do better. And that's our bottom line challenge, is to take care of each person, every family member, every family in our community. So thanks everybody for joining in this process, for being good citizens, and for helping us grow as a citizen, as a commission. And thanks for the opportunity to serve.
Thank you. Candidate Rochelle Aboa.
Thank you. I just want to definitely tell you guys thank you. I know all of us mentioned that our candidacy stopped and campaigning stopped as well. So I want to say thank you guys, and also thank you to my campaign team for definitely pushing through. The reason why I decided to run was because I wanted to, instead of keep complaining about things and saying the city, this and that, I wanted to be about it. I wanted to represent. I wanted to be a point of contact for every single body here in Fargo. I'm aiming for a greener, cleaner Fargo. I definitely do go ahead and agree with Mr. John and Mr. Doug for a healthier Fargo, as well as diversity and inclusion. I know we didn't really talk a little much about that, but my stance is it's time for the City of Fargo Commissioner table to reflect where we have grown in our city, and that is all walks of life. I definitely want to be a part of this great historical moment that we are aiming towards. I definitely want to use taxpayer money properly, where they know that they're getting the best from their tax money. And me being in the financial field for the past 6+ years, I definitely come with that expertise, as well as, sorry guys, a little bit nervous still, as well as my ethics and value. I hold strongly to the things I say, and I ask that people hold me strongly to that as well. So when I tell you that I am on the city commissioner team and running because I believe in the city that I live in. I believe in small business owners. Yes, we know that big corporation is good, but we also need to protect our small business owners. We need to protect those who are new homeowners. We need to protect those who already invested in the city and hold them high. We also need to retain our graduates. Yes, Fargo has a lot of jobs, but they're not paying good, and that is the problem. We need to be part of a greater cycle.
Thank you. And thank you to all the candidates. And just for the record, for those of you that are watching at home, we're not able to have an audience tonight due to the fact that we are practicing social distancing. I prefer physical distancing, actually. We should be socially together, but physically apart. But there are technically only 8 people in this room tonight, or this afternoon, or whenever you watch this, because you can pull this up at home anytime, and some of you may watch it later on tomorrow or in the weeks to come. But thanks to Melissa and her team at the Downtown Community Partnership for sponsoring the debate, to the City of Fargo for providing the facility and the technology for the debate, and to our candidates especially for engaging today, this evening, and providing information to the voters so that they can make their best possible decisions on who their preferred candidate or candidates are. And somewhat of an aside, as someone who loves Fargo, I am thrilled by the passion each of you as candidates have shown us during this time. And I know Fargo will be in very good hands as we move forward. And as a little plug again for the downtown, In the first approximately 130 years of the downtown Fargo, the valuation was about $120 million and declining. 16 years later, people are buying in on the concept of wanting to be downtown. The valuation of downtown properties exceeded $670 million. So in the first 130 years as a city, it was $120 million declining, and then in the next 16 years, it went up to $670+ million. So people are bully on Fargo. So good evening, stay healthy, and be good to each other. Thank you very much, candidates, for being here, and I hope this is a good platform for you to share what you really have in terms of priorities and positions on the various topics that are so important to the future of our community. Thank you.